Betts. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I congratulate the member for Dundee West on securing this debate and his excellent contribution, and also my friends, the Chair of the International Development Select Committee and the member for Brentford and Arsworth on their powerful contributions this morning, because this is a really important debate. In March this year, I was proud to be elected President of Young Parliamentarians at the IPU, the Inter-Parliamentary Union. And the Inter-Parliamentary Union is like a United Nations of the legislatures, so it represents 180 national parliaments around the world. And I vow to use this position to make young people's voices heard on the world stage, and I hope my contribution will be a very small part in fulfilling that promise. Because young people will not only be the victims of climate change, they'll be the greatest contributors to action against it. It is a profound injustice that those least responsible for causing the climate emergency will suffer the worst of its consequences. At the same time, debt burdens and increased food and energy prices mean that many climate vulnerable countries have less fiscal capacity to deal with those consequences for adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage, and the resulting harms to health, the environment, and the ways of life. I want to welcome the confirmation in an answer to my written question that it remains the government's intention to deliver 11.6 billion of UK international climate finance between April 2021 and March 2026. But I hope the Minister will stand up to those in his own party who would like to see the UK abandon this commitment. And I would urge him today to take the opportunity to clarify how the UK will meet its commitments within the existing timeframe, including front-loading climate finance and showing how this will be new and additional climate finance. But to meet our commitments, we need to go further, and we must properly tax the big polluters, because we know that fossil fuel corporations knew the harms their products were causing. They covered up the science for years, funded disinformation and spread doubt, delaying action that could have saved countless lives. And these very same companies are currently raking in obscene, record-breaking profits, predominantly due to the effects of the war in Ukraine. Polluters must begin compensating for the destruction they've caused to our environment and to the lives of people who have done the very least to cause the climate emergency. Research from Greenpeace has shown that the fossil fuel industry made enough in profits between the year 2000 and 2019 to cover the costs of climate-induced economic losses in 55 of the most climate vulnerable countries, nearly 60 times over. And it's the responsibility of the richest countries who set global tax rules to make this a reality. The importance of doing so couldn't be clearer. Estimates have shown that the world's most vulnerable countries can expect to suffer an average GDP hit of 19.6% by 2050 and 63.9% by the beginning of the next century. Even if global temperature increases are limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, vulnerable countries face an average GDP reduction of 13.1% of GDP by 2050 and 33% by 2100. Even if 1.5 is kept alive, a properly functioning loss and damage mechanism is urgently needed. And failure to do this will be felt particularly acutely across the continent of Africa, with 8 of the top 10 worst affected countries being on that continent. In the first 6 months of 2022, there were 119 climate weather-related events in developing countries, causing 26.2 billion worth of losses in those countries affected. This shows the scale of the challenges we face as part of an international community. My colleagues have made the case of a moral responsibility for loss and damage today. But it's also in our self-interest, our economic self-interest, to take greater action now. We must build on the breakthrough agreements of last year's COP. Now is the time to operationalise the Loss and Damage Fund, to put the money in and to get it working, to direct finance to those communities with the greatest need. I'll continue to make these calls alongside colleagues, and I'll be proud to make them at COP28, which I hope to attend in my new role later this year. And the Minister should rest assured that young people will continue to make these calls until they are listened to. Thank you, Mr. Betts.